From dueling dynamics over judicial appointments to government messaging ahead of the Alberta budget and a Conservative MP's advocacy for Canada-U.S. relations. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Calgary-based public opinion consultant Janet Brown and Jim Groom, political scientist, recently retired from Medicine Hat College. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the Premier pledging to hold back funding for new judicial appointments if Ottawa does not give the province more of a say on who is picked. It's prompted this response from the federal justice minister.
At risk of stating the obvious, it's essential that we have a judiciary who's able to make decisions without fear or favor amongst those who have the power to appoint or, in theory, remove a judge from the bench.
In a letter to the Prime Minister, the Premier says the appointment process needs reform. She wants the province to be consulted on future appointments to the Court of King's Bench, the Alberta Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court. To fill vacancies, Danielle Smith wants to see a special advisory committee of 2 people recommended by the province. There are 3 vacancies on the Court of King's Bench at the moment. Janet, what do you see the Premier accomplishing here? Why would this make a difference where Alberta is concerned?
Well, this fits with the whole suite of ideas, the whole agenda that Danielle Smith has to try and get greater power for Alberta. And this is an idea that's been around for a long time. I mean, when decades ago when I was in university and people were talking about things like a Triple E Senate, they were also talking about things like this. But it's kind of a bit of a fringe issue. I mean, Danielle Smith has got a strong base of people who want her to make reforms. I'm not sure this is the most talked about reform. So it's interesting that she's doing it now. It's interesting that she's ramped this up to the point where she is threatening to withhold funding if she doesn't get her way. So I guess I'm seeing it both ways. On the one hand, I see that it fits with her overall agenda. I'm just surprised that she's gone so strong in this way today.
Jim, is there anything to say Alberta is different than any of the other provinces to warrant the system being reformed in this manner?
No, not really. I mean, the Constitution guarantees the process under Part 7 of the Constitution Act of 1982. And so, I mean, it's structured there. You'd have to make a constitutional change to do a wholesale change of it. Now, the appointment judicial advisory committees, we already have one representative from the Alberta Justice Minister, and we have the Alberta Law Society and quite a good representation of the 7 members that are appointed. So I think this is a bit of a red herring. We have a really tough budget coming up at the end of the month. And if you need a distraction, it always goes back to their playbook. Let's take on the feds and make a cause célèbre or something, as Janet says, is really not many people even understand the difference between the provincial courts and the Court of King's Bench and things of that nature.
Janet, were the federal government to bend to these Alberta demands, what would you see coming of the conversation around protecting the independence of the judiciary from the potential of political interference?
Well, Michael, honestly, I find that a question hard to answer. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a constitutional expert. I'm going to sort of throw myself behind the title of pollster. My job is just to try and figure out what the regular person would think. And I'm good at that because I'm pretty regular when it comes to stuff like this. These are complexities that I can't possibly know the answers to. And the average person can't know the answers to them as well. What I do know, though, is if they withhold funds, then that means fewer court cases are heard. The courts are already backed up, and that will not go over well with the public that the court system is being slowed down even more. So I'm just really not sure where the right legal solution is for all of this. And as a pollster, I'm not even really sure where the public opinion solution is in this either.
Okay. Next up, Smith government says Albertans should expect the upcoming budget to reflect the realities of a more difficult fiscal environment. With the budget now set to be delivered Thursday, February 26th, the government says lower than anticipated oil prices and an increasing population are straining Alberta's finances. The last fiscal update in November projected a deficit of $6.4 billion. Jim, how much of a signal should Albertans take from that messaging around fiscal challenges?
I think they have to really be prepared for a tight budget. You know, the government has said we're not going to raise taxes without a referendum, and they've made all these promises. But this is almost a $15 billion switch from the surplus we had last fiscal year to the 6.4 deficit this year. That's a huge amount on a budget the size of Alberta's, and it's going to be really difficult, as we saw from the Municipal Association, Rural Municipalities Association. It was very straightforward that they're not getting the funding, and they're closing bridges and roads and other things, and this is going to impact on our infrastructure. We all paid attention when Calgary had a problem with its water mains, but this is throughout the province where the infrastructure is suffering, and you can't shore that up without lots of funds coming in from wherever.
Janet, how do you see this messaging playing with a stakeholder like municipalities, especially with what we heard from the president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta off the top?
Sure. Well, the budget is probably 3 or 4 weeks away. And the fact that government is already telegraphing how difficult it's going to be, what a tough budget it's going to be, that tells me it really is going to be a tough budget if they think they're trying to lay the groundwork here. Now, an organization like RMA, I know that they are lobbying government constantly throughout the year, and I'm sure they've been talking about this for months. With 3 weeks left to go, it's unlikely they're going to negotiate anything new with the budget. But I think Cara Westerling did a great job laying out the needs of rural municipalities. She did a great job just explaining how, when you're talking about vast swaths of land and very few population, it's hard to pay for these things. So she's made her case, and if RMA is not satisfied with what's in the budget, we'll hear more from them, because, as I said, I think they've laid out a very good case for the struggles that they face, and government's trying to lay out a very good case for the struggles they face.
Jim, that represents the voice of rural Albertans. How do you see the government responding to that?
Well, they're kind of caught between the rock and a hard place. This is their base, but as pointed out, it's only 15% of the population. So can they take it for granted that they really don't have to do much to maintain that base? We see this year in and out. When the rural voters go out, they vote 60, 70, 80% in favor of conservative governments, whether it be the PC or the UCP. And it's been consistently that for years. So I would think there's going to be this question of, well, can we take them for granted? They're only 15% of the population. They're also loyal to us no matter what we do to them. So from a political perspective, I think the government is just going to say, we got a $6.4 billion deficit coming up. We just got to tighten the belt.
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, reaction to a Conservative MP heading out on his own to advocate for Canada-U.S. relations. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. Some interesting dialogue developing on the federal front, prompted by Conservative MP Jamil Jivani heading to Washington, D.C. this week to, in his words, help the Prime Minister be successful in negotiating a trade deal.
CUSMA and trade with the United States is so important to the Canadian economy and to our future as an independent, self-reliant nation that Conservatives and Liberals don't need to fight over this at all. In fact, we need to work together.
We have extensive contacts with the U.S. administration, constant contacts with the U.S. administration. Minister LeBlanc gave a briefing to Mr. Jivani, who I don't believe is the trade critic for the opposition, certainly not the Minister of International Trade, nor the Prime Minister.
Jamil Jivani is a longtime friend of U.S. Vice President, that is, J.D. Vance, and says he will be meeting with stakeholders about cross-border relations, though is still confirming meetings with political contacts. Janet, how do you view this individual Conservative MP's mission to Washington and the offer to help the PM negotiate a trade deal?
Well, it's a very bizarre situation. It's obvious that Jivani wants in on this. He thinks there's something important going on and he wants in. But he is not a Liberal. The Prime Minister does not see him as an official member of the team. And he's not even a critic within the Conservative Party. So it doesn't look like even Pierre Poilievre wants to give him a major role on the opposition side. But the card he does have to play is he did go to school with Vice President Vance, and so it looks like He is frustrated that people aren't taking advantage of his connections and getting him out there. But the fact of the matter is, the Liberals don't find this a very appealing prospect, obviously, and Pierre Poilievre doesn't find this a very appealing prospect. So I think at best we're just looking at, a private individual who's trying to influence the people who he has some sort of a private history with.
Jim, how do you see this playing in the wake of last weekend's Conservative convention in Calgary and Pierre Poilievre's successful leadership review?
Of course, Mr. Poilievre has taken a different tone, a bit of a conciliatory approach to things, as opposed to the attack dog type of image that he's built up over the years. So it is really a transition. Now, after the Americans invaded Venezuela, he immediately posted online that, congratulations, this is great, good work type of an approach. And that would certainly not be consistent with the Canadians' position, especially in light of the 51st state threats, etc. I think that we're going to find this a bit of a conflict. Now, when the premiers all were trying to get involved and have direct contact with Trump in the case of Daniel Smith, and then we get Ontario's Doug Ford sending out a message supporting Ronald Reagan's approach to no tariffs, etc. It just caused a lot of dissension. There was no sole single source of information coming. And the Liberals need to focus that. They need to be the government, and they need to actually be the only spokesperson for the government and for Canada. And if we get MPs going rogue and thinking they have more influence than they actually do, I think that's just going to cause more concern.
Janet, how comparable is this to the Alberta dynamic? Jim was just pointing out Premier Smith making that surprise visit to Mar-a-Lago to personally meet with Donald Trump just over a year ago.
Well, she leads a government, right? And you can argue with whether that was a good tactic or not, but she is a government leader, and he is not. He's the member of an opposition party, and as I said, he's not even has a critic portfolio there. So the other thing about this issue, it kind of reminded me of the fact that Pierre Poilievre doesn't have his security clearance. Does Jamil Javani have his security clearance? So I guess he's an elected individual, not a member of government. So it's a bit of a sticky wicket here, and it just seems more problematic for me that somebody without a security clearance and with an official role in government will present themselves as somewhat official because they're a backbencher on the opposition side.
Okay, so Jim, we heard reaction from the PM off the top. But where do you feel this move by the Conservatives leaves the Carney government?
Well, as usual, they're trying to put them between a rock and a hard place. And of course, Carney doesn't want to, as Janice pointed out, this isn't an official representative. This isn't a person with a security clearance. And yet they would have to say behind the scenes kind of contacts might be beneficial. So they are caught between a rock and a hard place. They have to promote the aspect that this MP might be of assistance to them, and they'll take all the help they can get because on any given day, Mr. Trump can change his mind, put up another tariff, and nail us with some other punishments. So I guess they'll run with it as much as they can, but I think they'd be really reluctant to share any inside information with them that would divulge exactly what our tactics are going to be for negotiating the CUSMA.
So let me throw a bit of a curveball at you, Janet. What if it is that President Trump ends up saying something like, I'll only deal with Jamil Javani? What happens then? Where does that leave the government?
It probably won't make Jamil Javani very popular with Canadians, but I don't know. The whole thing is just very funny. I have so many friends that wouldn't go down to the States if you paid them, and Jamil Javani is mad because nobody will send him down to the States to advocate on their behalf. So, when he gave his presentation last night, there was no sign of the Conservative logo. The Prime Minister is just kind of dismissing this of like, we'll talk to him if he wants to go down, but there's no official role for this guy.
All right. We'll have to leave it there for time. Great to see you both. Thank you kindly for this.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Janet.